Live, everyone. Welcome back to the House Agriculture and Forestry Committee. We're meeting this afternoon to talk about a number of things, but we're really fortunate to have Diane Bothfeld with us. There were some questions today about low milk prices and what exactly is happening. Among other things, Diane, some of us have noticed that when we've gone shopping, there have been limits on the number of gallons of milk you could buy, and how that didn't seem to make sense since there seems to be an ample supply. So welcome, thank you. And if you could introduce yourself and then chat with us, we'd really appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Chairwoman Partridge. Diane Bothfeld, Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. Yeah, milk prices are certainly declining quickly. The issue being well, let's take a step back. So back in November, December, the expectation was that the average would probably come in over $19 for 2020. Things looked really good. The dairy margin coverage program didn't look like it would have a payment for the whole year, and that was in November and December. So the start of this year, January, February, not bad. We did the farm show. We talked about prices, still thought things were pretty good. And then the COVID-19 outbreak in the end of February into March, and of course, where we are in April. Disruptions throughout the three main things that impact prices. That would be the domestic use, exports, and the restaurant industry. So we know what's occurred with restaurant food service being shut down. There are estimates out there that throughout the United States that equals 10% of the supply. So restaurants being closed down is a tremendous hit on the milk prices. And then exports has been another tremendous hit, where we were in November, December, people really being excited about exports coming back. The deal had been struck with China, the new NAFTA, the trade agreement between Mexico and Canada getting resolved. So the export market was expected to enhance milk prices. So the markets, the agreements are there. The impact is enough people to operate docks. When China was having their major outbreak, they did not operate the docks. So who's going to unload them? Currently, there are concerns about moving shipments, and will a country allow the ship to dock? Just concerns that you're coming from a country that has COVID ID, who doesn't nowadays, I suppose, but the movement of ships, you know, we've heard about the cruise ship being able to dock or not. So some concerns around ships loaded with food being able to dock as well, and having the workers there to unload. So concerns all around. So two hits to the dairy prices, that of restaurants and that of exports. So that leaves the domestic market. And yes, we all have to eat. But if you think of the difference between a restaurant meal and a meal at home, restaurants really, those dishes are made to appeal to the palate. So they may have cheese, heavy cream, milk, sour cream, all of these things in your meal in a restaurant. Or think about sitting down to a basket of rolls and butter, and then your meal, and then your dessert. All of those are really heavy in dairy products because they really do taste good. And the other thing around restaurants, if you don't eat all that meal, it's pitched out. At home, you may have the same kind of meal, but you would put the leftovers aside and hopefully eat them later. So it does have a tremendous impact on use of dairy products in the food service. So those are all coming together and adversely impacting dairy prices. So we started the year thinking we would be well over $19. The months of April, May, June, probably July, especially April and May, will struggle to reach $13 probably. Things are still moving around a little bit. I don't know that we've found the bottom yet on prices that are for the trading in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange on cheese and butter, non-fat dry milk and dried whey. So very volatile right now, but volatile in a downward fashion. The other thing that's impacting everybody is those who produce a lot of product for food service, why would they be operating? Food service isn't buying dairy products. So there's only one processor who is not processing milk, contacted the agency and said they were shutting down for a period of time, and that was Grafton and Brattleboro. So they are not going to be processing milk in the near future. It's about a tractor trailer load of milk per day. We have not heard from any other processors in Vermont that would be shutting down. So that has not occurred in Vermont, but it has beginning to occur in other states, or they're just cutting back on their orders for milk. And yes, that causes milk to be dumped. So that is starting to occur in Vermont.
Okay, thanks, Diane. And by the way, I want to remind folks that you can use this handy dandy tactic if you want to just unmute yourself for a short period of time. You can use the space bar, which I'm doing right now. So Diane, for instance, so Grafton Cheese is not accepting milk?
Correct.
And so what about the farmers? Like I think my constituents in Grafton, the Rushtons, were shipping their milk to the Grafton Cheese Company.
Mm-hmm.
Will their milk go into some kind of other overflow, or what happens with that?
So the cooperatives, I believe there are people who do sell direct to some cheesemakers, some folks that sell direct to some milk bottlers. The independents are a little harder to determine what's going to happen. The cooperatives, when a farmer signs up with a cooperative, the expectation is that the milk will be managed and sold. So if it's not going to one facility, then it goes to a different facility. But in this time of reduced purchasing, it may be dumped. So within the co-op world, from what we have heard so far, they put the milk on the truck, weigh it, sample it, determine how much milk it was, and then it is disposed of. So the whole truckload would be disposed of. They're not choosing which farms. They're not saying, oh, it's Diane today and it's Representative Partridge tomorrow. That whatever truckload makes the most sense. Sometimes it's based on that manure pit is easy to back up to. So that's why it gets dumped at that specific farm, or, so it's not a targeting of specific people. And some farms may never know that their milk was dumped because it went on the truck as it always has, and the truck went away. So within the co-op world, within the federal order world, all that is documented. All the data is collected. The federal order system has a mechanism when milk is disposed of. So milk can be disposed of, prior to COVID-19 because it got too hot, or somebody made a mistake and put wash water in, or something that causes this milk can't be used. So they have a mechanism within the federal order to record the fact that the milk was produced, value it at the lowest price, and then it is calculated into the blend price or statistical uniform price that farmers are paid. The federal order doesn't expect a lot of that every month. So when the times like COVID, or when there's a lot of holidays, so many plants sometimes shut down between Christmas and New Year's, and if there's too much milk, then there would be dumping. So this has occurred in the past where the federal order makes arrangements and knows there'll be more milk that's going to be dumped, but that does get recorded. The information gets taken in. There is a value assigned to that milk that impacts the price paid back to farmers. But if you're a co-op and that was your members' milk that was dumped, it's provided a value through the federal order system, but the co-op had no sale on the other end. So there's an expectation to pay the farmer, but there was no corresponding sale to anyone else. It was dumped. So there will be losses to the cooperative as well. So the farmer will be paid, but if there's losses to the cooperative, then those may be assigned to farmers, all the farmers of the cooperative, that the cooperative had to take a loss on that milk that was dumped. So they're making every effort possible not to dump milk if they can. You're on mute, Carolyn.
I used the space bar and it didn't work. So Let that be a lesson to everyone. So do farmers, who has the capacity to take milk into their manure pits?
That's important too. You know that we have something in our housekeeping bill that would require those who want to put product into a manure pit to contact the agency. Currently, there's no requirement, so we're very hopeful that you will pass the housekeeping bill this session. Cooperatives have been working with us. The water quality folks need that information, but farmers specifically have to have that information as part of their nutrient management plan if they take in milk. The volume that they have available in their pit is very important. Farmers are required to keep a certain amount of freeboard space between the edge of the pit and the top so that they're not under a threat of overflow. So farmers are aware of that, but it's something that needs to be reinforced with farmers. We're working with the co-ops, we're working with the farmers at this point.
Okay, thanks, Diane. Any questions for Diane right off the bat here?
Yeah, I do.
Rodney?
Yeah, on the other side of this, is there any indication of what help might come on to the farmers of this low milk price? And when that might happen?
Yeah, Representative Graham, I have not heard of the when. Within the stimulus bill, the CARES Act that was passed, 9.5 billion was sent to USDA to provide to producers. So that's everybody, soybeans, corn, everybody, and dairy was specifically mentioned. The Secretary Tebbetts has a letter that we're getting other New England and New York and Pennsylvania type states to sign on to of what we think could be done for dairy. That goes in later today. We're asking for the potential for direct payments, sizable direct payments if possible, to farmers. We're asking for a potential of a floor price, saying milk should be $19.50. The federal order comes out where it is, and the difference between the two is paid federally to farmers. That's another ask. A third one is to use the powers that USDA secretary has to buy up product off the marketplace and use it in federally sponsored feeding programs. We know that there are more people out of work. There's pressure being put on food banks and those type of things to buy up this product and distribute it. And I think those are the reopening of the dairy margin coverage program, but that's not something specifically that the USDA secretary can do. Congress would have to do that. When we have calls each week with Secretary Perdue from USDA, they are trying to sort out this expenditure. Of course, you know, there's a lot of steps to take and deciding how that 9.5 gets divvied up. And so, no, we don't have an answer yet. And there are other things within the CARE Act right now. The payroll protection, PPE, can't remember what the E stands for. Farmers are eligible for that payroll protection. So some of them are working with Small Business Administration with our local lenders, VitaVac and Farm Credit. Those are immediate, really quick. I think they're very low interest loans with the potential of forgiveness. So farmers are utilizing that right now. So those are some of the things that are out there currently, but that USDA pot of money, there is not a timeline yet for those funds to come out.
Other questions for Diane? Vicki, your hand is up.
Yes, Diane, thank you, because I do have constituents. North Troy is a big farm, Chapet Farm. I've heard they're dumping some milk, but are there other backlogs for farmers, such as feed being not shipped to the area? Are things otherwise going fairly smoothly in the meantime?
We've been checking in with folks that have those supplies, and so far we have not had any interruptions. grain comes in from the Port of Montreal or from Canada in many cases, and there's been no disruption to that, even though there's been concerns with the border and closure to just general travel back and forth. That's still moving. So we have not heard of any issue with supplies at this point. The one question I think Representative Partridge that you had that I might not have gotten to is the concerns of stores putting up signs limiting the purchase of dairy products. I was on a call last week nationally, and this is across the country. So certainly a concern. Locally here in Vermont, we have contacted all the major retailers, the Price Chopper, Shaw's, and Hannaford type retailers. The corporate offices say there are no limits, but there are still signs up in stores. We're working to get those signs down. They send the wrong message. There are plenty of dairy products. It's just getting them there and getting them out. Secretary Tebbets will be sending out a letter probably by the end of the day today to all retailers in Vermont, encouraging them to, if they still have those signs up, to take them down. If they're having issues finding dairy products, we can help them make those contacts. And there's plenty of milk available, milk, cheese, butter, plenty available in Vermont. On the national call, they talked about some other issues for grocery stores that may be why they put up these signs. This isn't what we're hearing in Vermont, but concerns about staffing. They stocked up the dairy case and now those staffers go do something else. And so if they put a limit on it, the inventory will last longer. So they don't have to go back and stock the dairy case again. So that was one of the things that was brought up. Some concerns nationally about product getting there. The fluid milk comes on one truck, the butter comes on a different truck, the yogurt on a third truck. So if there's any interruptions in trucking, that could be an issue as well. But those are not the issues that we're seeing in Vermont.
I was in Hannaford yesterday, and I have to say there was hardly any Cabot cheese, including the 3-pound blocks. Lucky for me, I hoarded a couple 3-pound blocks. So we're set for a couple weeks.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think if you are keeping track of things, Cabot has out an advertisement for any displaced workers that want a job. They need staff. There have been folks in their system that usually do office work that have been retasked to go work in their plants. So they are working 24/7 to A, try not to dump any milk, and B, to keep up with this demand. And a lot of several stores, they may only take delivery once a week. And now they really probably could take delivery more often, but it's getting that resorted out. And does Cabot have enough truck drivers, or do they have enough staff to take in another delivery? So some things to work on for sure, but there's product available. We just got to get it to the stores.
Yeah. Thanks. Are there any more questions for Diane? I know we have Diane until 1 o'clock, and then she's got to do something else. But I'm not seeing any hands. I know that Tom Bach is having a hard time getting online for some reason. So hopefully he'll be joining us soon. I'm not seeing any hands, Diane. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, I think Representative Strong might have her hand up.
Oh, there you are, Vicki. Thanks. Yes, Vicki.
Diane, I just enjoy hearing you because you're reassuring us in the sense of you have a handle on issues and how it's evolving. Could you explain a little more how you're keeping track of all this from home?
Well, as you can see, I have a nice fancy set of headphones and a microphone. So I am on the phone in this manner a lot. Hours after hours, it seems it's a different way of doing things. We are checking in. We had a call earlier today just about dairy. There's a group, we get the regulatory group. Laura Ginsburg's been doing great work with the cheesemakers. And I do a lot of work with policy. So we have put our heads together once a week and talk about what we're hearing, what we're seeing. Then we talk with Anson and Allison to make sure they're up to speed. It is constant. We're trying so hard to communicate as much as possible. We're also working on a project to see if we can take some of these loads of milk that are being disposed of and do something locally to make it into a product. lots of details there to work out, lots of details. You know, the one tractor trailer load of milk is 6,000 gallons, jugs of milk. So who's got the capacity to distribute that? Food bank, you know, we got to work with them, and how do they get it out to folks? And just think about some of the food pantries that are in the basement of the church, and they just have a regular refrigerator. You can't drop off 5 cases of milk there. They can't keep it cold. So just all these pieces to work through. We are trying and working on that to see if there's any possibility there as well. So thank you. We are talking a lot on the phone and by video chat, trying to keep up with everything.
Thank you, Diane. Any more questions for Diane? All right. I see no more little blue hands. Tom, you made it. Did you have any questions for Diane?
No, but I'm sorry I missed the meeting with her. I had some technical difficulties in my head, I think.
Are you cold? You got a coat on.
Well, I was outside for a while and I came in and I forgot to take my coat off. But,
Okay. All right, Diane, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us. We really appreciate it. Anytime you want to, if you have anything you want to share with us, please feel free to reach out. Let me and Linda know, and we'll be glad to have you back.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye now.
Bye-bye. All right. So I'd like to turn back to what we were discussing before we left our last meeting, and that is the whole biosolid PFOAs issue. And Carrie, you're there. I don't see you, but you're there, right?
I am. Yep, here.
Okay. The disembodied presence. There you are. So, Carrie, can you tell us? I'd kind of like to understand. I don't know if the rest of you would, but I kind of like to understand how this practice, which I will say once again, I always thought was a big mistake, but how this practice of spreading waste from,
Mhm.
from these facilities on farm fields ever got going.
Oh boy, I'm not sure I can answer that, but I can say that it sort of is being exacerbated with the universal recycling bill, the Act 148, that doesn't allow any organic matter into the landfill, so it has to go somewhere. Your options are landfilling it, land applying it, or incinerating it. And Vermont has sort of adopted the land application disposal method, especially since will be, or if it isn't already prohibited from the landfill.
Okay, I do see Mike O'Grady's hand up.
Thank you,
Mike,
Mike.
would you like to say something?
So A&R puts out a report every couple of years which documents the land application program, including a history of that program. So that would, I think, if you want to know where it arose from and why, I think that's probably the best resource for you.
Okay.
And then I think landfill disposal is going to remain an option, because what is banned after July 1 is food residuals. And so I don't know if food residuals qualify as septage. That's something I would want to clarify with A&R, and I could probably do that today if you would like.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. It seems to me that if these are your 3 choices, landfilling, applying, or incinerating, and you're putting horrible stuff on farm fields that are potentially making these farm fields toxic in terms of milk production, or I don't know, is there any evidence that PFOAs, et cetera, are showing up in vegetables if they're grown on land that has been spread with this gunk? Carrie?
Yeah, yep. Let me see. Um,
Yep.
Carolyn, would you allow me to share my screen for a second?
Yeah, sure. As long as it's, you know,
It is
appropriate.
very much so.
Kidding.
So our biggest concern is on some of these farms is the fact that the land applications are contaminating the aquifers underneath these farms. We do have an idea about how much soil contamination would be an issue. And as soon as I can share my screen, I'll show you the equation and some of the science we've been using to evaluate the farms in Vermont based on the data that we are collecting through with DEC.
Do you need permission or something from Linda to be able to share your screen?
I think I do. Yep.
Okay, Linda, this is up to you because though I'm a co-host, this is beyond my my ability at this point.
So Maine doing a lot of research and has developed sort of uptake coefficients for PFOA and PFOS. There are many other compounds, but the equation takes into account the crop, the soil value, the crop uptake coefficient, how much of the feed comes from the fields that were contaminated, and and then comes up with a modeling number that predicts how much we would expect to see in milk. Maine has also done some work where they've verified their model based on a heavily contaminated farm over there. And it is a conservative model. The model overestimates what we would find in milk, but it's still something that I believe is worth using.
So Linda is struggling to,
Yep.
well, she's not struggling. She can't find a way to allow you to share your screen. So she's going to check with IT and.
I can actually, right now, I'll email Linda the PowerPoint presentation
Okay,
and she can
Is
share
that
it.
called wastewater treatment sludge and septic management?
No.
No, that's what I just sent you.
And do you want that on mine?
If Carolyn does.
sure.
So
Yeah, but
Carrie, go
take-
ahead and send me that and I'll get it. I'll
Yep,
try to get it
I
on.
will.
So Mike, was there something that you wanted to say? And then I'll go to John O'Brien.
No, I just wanted to clarify what I sent to Linda was the report that I referenced that has the history of land applications in Vermont.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, John O'Brien and then Tom.
Hi, just to get up to speed on the universal recycling and what Carrie just said about organic matter versus what Mike said about food residuals. What is the going forward from July 1st? What are the Vermont rules going to be on sort of organic non-food residuals? You know, like Christmas trees, leaves, any biomass. Is that also not going to be allowed in landfills? Or sludge for this matter?
Leaf and yard residual is banned, is already banned. Let me just check.
Yeah, my understanding was it was all organic matter, but I would be absolutely foolish to contradict Mike.
Well, I'm emailing A&R on that right now. Leaf and yard residual was banned from the landfill on July 1, 2016.
Okay. John O'Brien.
No, I think that did it, but just right. If they're a category of biomass, whatever that might be, you know, wood chips, for example, construction waste, I mean, sort of what we were talking about, you know, things with carbon in them essentially. Are those all going to be banned? Or is it just really food residuals on July 1st?
That's what I'm gonna email A&R to find out right now. Because the
Okay,
statute
great.
says food residuals, and not all organics.
Mhm.
So I had to
Okay.
see how they're interpreting that.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Tom Bach? Do you want to unmute yourself?
Just a little bit of my recollection of dealing with sludge and from my select board days. We used to spread it, as a matter of fact, Carolyn, in some fields and farms in Rockingham, your district. And we were stopped from doing that many years ago. And I thought it was, as I recall, it's because of nearness to streams and slope of the fields. So we started shipping to a facility in Western New York, which reclaimed it and did something with it. And I think to this day, we continue to do that. So there is a place for sludge.
Okay.
It's costly. It's costly to ship it there, but we do it.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Would you mind finding out where that place is?
Sure.
Great. Okay, Vicky's hand is up and John O'Brien. So Vicky, you're first.
Thank you. I'll have a question for Carrie in just a minute. But when we talk about landfills for Vermont, there's only one, and it's the Coventry landfill, just 15 miles from my house. It looks like a mountain, and it's a pretty contentious place. A lot of opinions going on about it. And one of the intriguing things, and maybe actually, Michael, I'll ask you, because you probably remember the testimony that took place on universal recycling, but that landfill needs organic matter because they provide energy through the methane. Was that discussed very much in terms of that landfill still needing organic matter?
I don't recall that in the discussion. There was discussion about making sure that the landfill maintained as much capacity as possible, and therefore sending some of the different streams that were going into the landfill to other places for management. So it was more about landfill capacity and not about the need for the landfill to maintain some organic inputs. With that said, there was discussion about how there won't be 100% compliance with the prohibition on food residuals, and that there will be some organic still going into the landfill, because it's just impossible to maintain 100% compliance over what people put in their trash.
Thank you. And just real quick, a question for Carrie about the biosolids on the land. What kind of nutrients, what benefit is it to the fields in general? Just organic matter, but other nutrients that supposedly are helping?
They do provide nutrients, both nitrogen and phosphorus. And any land applied biosolid does need to meet the nutrient management plan of the farm that accepts it. So it is calculated. If you're a medium or large farm, it is calculated in the nutrient loading of the soil. So it is one of the inputs that gets calculated in the nutrient management plan.
Thanks, Carrie. So John O'Brien, your hand was up, but then it's not, and so is Sharon's, and I'm just wondering, John, if you still have a question. Sharon? Okay. All right. Have we had any luck getting that document up that Carrie sent? I guess this is a question for Linda.
You're right, the bar doesn't always work. There is a way to connect so other people can put documents on, but the administration has it locked right now. I've asked them to unlock it so we can use it, but it hasn't happened yet. I'm sorry,
Okay.
but
All right.
shortly, I'll let you know.
Okay, thanks. So I don't know who this is a question for, but it sounds like that this is not a really good practice. And if we were to say, hey, you can't do this anymore, what would happen? Would it be landfill? I don't get it. You know, it seems like we're making a product we've been putting on farm fields, and that has been proven to not be such a great idea. Is there a way to filter out? I would doubt this, but is there a way to filter out the pathogens or heavy metals or whatever it is, or the PFASs? Carrie?
It would be really difficult to remove the PFAS chemicals, but you know, A&R is exploring some technology to sort of dewater the sludges and make them easier to transport if we were to send them for incineration or out of state or out of country. The expense in shipping some of the material is the weight, and there's the possibility of dewatering and shipping. Until we can get sort of this contamination piece under control, I do believe a prohibition on land that's used for food or feed would be appropriate. But that's, you know, speaking from the Agency of Agriculture's standpoint, because that's sort of the area that we regulate. That leaves the Agency of Natural Resources with a problem of where does it go and who deals with that problem. It might make it expensive for municipalities, which is why we've sort of ended up where we are.
Okay.
Some towns are sort of being able to dispose of it on farm is sort of a cost-effective way. So Linda, I was going to start on slide 15, just to sort of,
Unfortunately, this is the only page that came up. Oh, 15. Okay, got it.
yeah. Yep, just to sort of talk about the equation that we're using. And this is, we're looking at establishing soil screening levels to try and figure out how much exposure somebody could have from food or feed. And go ahead to 16. We'll go through this relatively quickly.
That's okay. We have another hour.
Oh, all right. So this is the formula that we're that we've been using to evaluate soil values. To sort of extrapolate what could become what could be found in the milk. And we did have a soil value that did come close to a level that we would be concerned about. And I'll get to there in a second, and I'll just go over some of the science that we use to sort of determine that. Go ahead to the
Carrie?
next. Yep,
Here, you hold on. Tom has a question
okay.
and John O'Brien has a question.
Mhm.
So Tom,
Carolyn, I got an answer to your question. The town of Chester has changed the companies they ship to. It's now picked up by Casella. No one knows where it goes.
okay. Thanks, Tom.
It's probably land applied, but A&R could really answer that question. Go ahead to the next slide.
Oh, wait, John O'Brien has a question.
Oh, sorry, John.
John? Oh, it looks like he stepped away from his desk. Go ahead, Carrie. We'll get him later.
Yep, so this is using a derived action level for milk. The number for Vermont was significantly lower because we use different calculations here in Vermont. This is an EPA number, and we run into this all the time where EPA is protecting 1 in a million. Vermont tries to, I'm sorry, EPA is protecting 1 in 100,000. Vermont really strives to protect 1 in a million with the numbers we derive. So we're dealing with an action level that's significantly lower. Go ahead to the next slide.
So what is Vermont's action level?
We don't have that in writing from the health department yet. We've been in conversations, but based on what we were finding in the soil, we didn't really need to establish that number just yet.
Okay, what's NG? Is that nanograms?
Nanograms per liter. It is.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. Yep, okay, John O'Brien is back at his desk. John, do you still have your question?
I apologize. It was Jim Maslin on the phone. What are the chances? So this may be anecdotal, but I remember up by the monitor barns in Richmond, I think I heard at one point that they were using sludge in those fields for turf production. And I didn't know if a certain amount of sludge and this septage went into sort of non-food agriculture. And if that was a possibility for more of this, or if it, even there, it's right next to the Winooski, so it might be a problem.
So those fields along Route 2 across from the monitoring barn, they don't receive sludge. They do receive septage, and they're owned by the owner of P&P Septic, and he owns those fields. They're rented to a farmer, and they do receive applications of septage from the owner of the property. So this is he pumps out septic tanks and applies to those fields.
Is that under AAFM's jurisdiction, or is it something else?
It is not, well, so the land application is not. Whether or not that crop is adulterated would fall under the Agency of Agriculture. So if the crop's adulterated or the milk is adulterated, both of those fall under the Agency of Ag. So right now we don't have control over what happens on the land, but we do have control over, or the ability to condemn a raw ag commodity, which would be the silage or the milk produced from that field.
Okay.
Tom, I see your hand up. Is it up again, or did you just forget to lower it?
I forgot to lower it. I can't find how to lower it here now. Wait a minute.
Oh,
Wait a minute, I got it. Okay.
I could, okay, you can do it. Then can you also mute yourself? Thank you. Good work.
So
right.
go ahead to the next slide, Linda. And these are some actual values of PFOA and PFOS in milk. You'll see that we can determine, or it was determined, that the PFOA is not necessarily a concern when it's in the soil, but PFOS can make it to milk. And while the contamination in Bennington was largely PFOA, what we're seeing from the firefighting foam and other places where sludge or biosolids are being applied is we're seeing higher concentrations of PFOS and potentially some of the other unregulated compounds. The health department chose to put 5 of the PFOA compounds on a regulated list. There are hundreds of these compounds, and some of the other ones are unregulated but are showing up in surface and groundwater. 19. And based on the research, these are transfer factors for hay. And if you'll go to the next slide, there's also transfer factors for corn. And we use those transfer factors in that formula that we saw on the first slide. Also, with the amount of feed, the percentage of the feed that was produced on the contaminated field, to come up with a number that we would expect to see in milk. And it was very low, so we actually didn't sorry. So we actually didn't have, we were able to determine that the milk wasn't a concern. And we also had papers that suggested that the PFOS, while it did go into the stover and stalk of the corn, it didn't make it to the ear. And the field that was receiving biosolids, the farmer forewent the harvesting of the entire crop for silage corn and just harvest the ear, which is where most of the protein and most of the energy is. And go ahead to the next slide. This is still, I basically wanted you guys to see the equation that we were using and some of the research that went into the equation that we were using to determine. And you can just go to the last 2 slides, and that's basically an example of how that equation would get used. And I don't remember the number that we came up with for potential in milk, but that was basically mitigated by the fact that they just harvested the ear and didn't harvest the entire plant. And
So Carrie,
mhm.
Linda, could you go back to slide 21? So if they're spreading this on the field, doesn't the plant take the PFOS or AS into
It
the
does.
systemically?
Yep, it does. It does.
Okay.
And what they did determine is with corn that stayed with the moisture. It stayed with the sort of where the water was in the plant, which was primarily the stalk and leaves.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. I just wonder why they mention these other processes for transfer of rain splash, wind erosion, etc.
Yeah, because you're applying it on top of the soil, and if it dries and causes dust, so most of it is going into the plant, but this is a soil plant soil masselet, so this accounts for any sort of residual dust that's on the crop as well.
Okay.
So it's taking everything into account, and it's basically saying that the surface there's the number for inside the plant, but the dust on the outside of the plant is not 0.
Okay.
And when we're talking in parts per trillion, Those are really small numbers, so even dust is a significant input.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
All right. I don't see any hands up, so why don't you go ahead?
That's pretty much all I wanted to use the presentation for. It's not my presentation. It is from the folks in Maine, but it is the formula that we use to evaluate soil values on farms in Vermont. Those numbers started coming in this fall. Just last week, we did get another bunch of numbers from DEC. So then they've had they've outsourced the sampling and analysis of PFOA and PFOS compounds, where these on their permitted biosolid sites, and those numbers are just coming in now and are yet to be evaluated. The first stretch was only 3 or 4 farms, and we did see issues there, so they agreed. They worked with us to make sure that every farm that was receiving biosolids was going to be tested.
So what exactly is the process as a farm? Do you have to apply for a permit to be able to do this?
Yeah, yep. Sometimes it's not the farm that owns the land. It can be the owner applies for the permit to apply biosolids, and then the land may be cropped by a farmer or somebody else who rents it. Farmers, if they do own the land, sometimes are receiving tipping fees for the land application. There's any sort of derivation of owner renter that you can imagine does exist in this scenario. Sometimes the towns actually own the land, and they allow the farmer to crop the land, and the municipality applies their biosolids on town-owned land. So like I said, any sort of scenario you can think of is likely to exist in this permitting program.
Yeah. Okay. And so but it's the owner of the land who applies for the permit, and they apply to A&R for that permit?
Yeah, more specifically DEC, the
Okay.
waste management folks, yes.
Did anybody ever think that this might be a problem?
So when in 2000, I think 15, when we were reading the biosolids white paper that was put together by RMA at the time, Resource Management Associates, produced a white paper that DEC provided to the legislature. We provided comments that we weren't comfortable with all of the things that weren't being looked for. We agreed that pathogens were important to look for and that heavy metals were important to look for. But there were other considerations that we were worried about, and that went in a letter over to DEC in 2015. So we were sort of anticipating the perfect storm of other contaminants, and based on what we were seeing of the Lake Champlain Basin programs and USGS issues with contaminants of emerging concern, this was on that list. There's a whole lot more, and wastewater, based on what we were seeing in effluents, we were also concerned with what would be ending up on soils.
Is there any way to remediate soil that's been contaminated like this?
With some compounds, yes, but with these, I hate this term, but I'm going to say it anyway. What they refer to these compounds as is forever chemicals. So the only way to really remediate them is to grow crops on the land and remove the crops. I don't believe those crops should necessarily be used for food or feed, but phytoremediation is really one of the only ways to get it out of the soil, or you can rely on sort of water leaching them away.
Okay. John O'Brien's hand is up. John?
Yeah, I just wondered about the sort of how much of this stuff was going on. You said about 200 sites, but do you have any figures on how many gallons or tonnage, or how it compares to, say, how much manure is spread in Vermont?
So I think I heard Mike say he provided the report, and those numbers would be in there.
Okay.
All right, Sharon's hand is up also.
Yes, so Carrie, you said that water would take it away, and I'm assuming that means it ends up in our surface waters, that it becomes part of the erosion issue, so it's contaminating wherever the runoff goes.
So all these compounds, and there, like I said, there's hundreds, react differently. There are certain ones that do move with water, and because it's fairly public, I think it's safe speaking about it. But the site in South Burlington, where DEC is monitoring, the concern really is groundwater, and that was based on the use of fighting foam at the National Guard base. Um, I there's a certain level of PFOS that can be detected in the Winooski River, based on moving with water off that site.
Mhm. And of course, our surface waters and our groundwaters interact. They're not completely distinct from each other. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Vicky has her hand up. Vicky?
Carrie, are the people spreading this, they buy this product, and where does that money go? And then how, maybe you said already, I was having a cookie break, but how is it spread? How is this stuff spread?
Again, multiple manners. So the Class A biosolids can be packaged and sold as fertilizers. The most famous one is Milorganite, which is a fertilizer made from Milwaukee's sludge or biosolids. And that gets dried and boxed and packaged and sold around the country as a fertilizer. But primarily, I think the answer to your question is it gets spread in manure spreader. So it'll go in a manure spreader and spread the same way that you would see liquid cow manure being spread.
All right. Vicky, are you all set? Yeah? Mike O'Grady has his hand up. Mike?
So I heard back from A&R about the question of whether septic sludge would be banned under the universal recycling law. And Matt Chapman from A&R, their general counsel, said that they are not banned by the organics prohibition. So sludge and septic can go into a landfill after July 1, 2020.
Thank you, Mike. All right, I'm just jotting this down. Okay. I had another question, but I'm forgetting what it was. I'm trying to do 5 things at once here. Carrie, was there anything you wanted to add?
Not really, other than, I did share language that would have paired well with the what is the bill that came out from the Senate being referred to as?
Soil enhancement.
Yeah. So I did provide language that would have paired well with the soil enhancement bill. It didn't necessarily speak directly to feeding food scraps, but it did provide resources to enable the agency to sort of build its own residuals management program, so we could actively determine whether or not anything that was being added to the soil was contaminated. So it would allow us to register these materials as soil amendments if they were going to be used on ag land, and would have provided us the resources to be able to manage this issue from the Agency of Ag. I understand that that may or may not come about based on the current state of all of our sort of collective existence. We'll have an economy to rebuild.
Yeah.
But that would have been something that I would have been bringing to the committee had we all been able to get together in the same room and discuss it. I didn't want to talk about it early on because it is a bigger topic and a very complex one.
So Carrie, if you were to move forward with this and register the stuff as soil amendments and manage it,
Mhm,
could part of that management be to test
mhm.
the stuff, this crap before it gets spread on land?
Yes, we would require an analysis from whoever was registering the product of these chemicals and potentially other chemicals of emerging concern or of concern prior to registration and prior to land application.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a good idea. So the only way that a question was asked earlier about how much, and I'm wondering if you have any idea how many acres. There are 200 sites, but how many acres in the state of Vermont are affected?
I haven't, I do have staff that could answer that question off off the tip of their tongue, but I also believe if it's in the report that Mike shared.
Oh, pretty
I
asked that
can,
question. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
you can take a quick look.
Okay, never mind. All right, Mike. Mike, your hand is up.
So I'm looking at the 2016 report. That says in Vermont, approximately 1,030 acres of agricultural land is certified for the land application of biosolids and septage.
Okay. Oh, that was my other question. Thanks, Mike. That's helpful. So it's not a vast majority by any means. It's a small number. So relatively speaking.
1,000 acres.
Yeah. Carrie, when this stuff gets spread as septage, are you telling me that one of those trucks that comes to our house once in a while, goes out, pumps out the septic tank, and they go directly to a field and pump it on that field?
That's my understanding. I'm not 100% familiar with how the program works, but there wouldn't necessarily be any pathogen kill. Each permit is different. There may be requirements for land incorporation relatively quickly, but I don't know what they are. I haven't looked at a lot of these permits.
So I see hands up, but I'm just gonna say that sounds really gross to me. So I'm gonna let Mike Grady go first, and then we've got Sharon and Rodney. So Mike?
I just forgot to lower my hand. I'm sorry. I don't have anything to say.
Okay, no worries. Sharon?
Okay, so I have heard stories of sludge being put into manure pits, and I was wondering if if that's a rumor or if that's something that's actually being done, because that's on par with it going directly onto the field without any treatment.
Carrie, do you know? Can you answer that?
I can't. I do know other land applied permitted waste. This is what Ryan has in the housekeeping bill. My understanding was that it was waste way that also needs a land application permit. If you're going to apply it to land that was being dumped in the pits, and if it went into a pit, it wouldn't need a permit. But again, I hate to keep deferring to Mike, but he helped Ryan draft that language, and if you can provide some clarity to that question, I would appreciate it.
Mike?
So it's in 8756, and what Ryan, in consultation with the Agency of Agriculture, came up with the term non-sewage waste, and I am finding that definition right now. Where is it?
I think Ryan might be listening to this, by the way. He might want to weigh in. He can text me if he wants.
So non-sewage waste means any waste other than sewage that may contain organisms pathogenic to human beings, but does not mean stormwater runoff. So it's anything that's not sewage, and sewage means waste containing human fecal coliform and other potential pathogenic organisms from sanitary waste and used water from any building, including carriage water and shower and wash water. Yeah, I think so. Waste other than sewage. And so sewage means it has fecal coliform and pathogenic organisms. So I think that would preclude most sewage and septage, sludge and septage.
Okay, Rodney has his hand up. Rodney?
Well, every few years I have to have my septic tank pumped out. And way back, they used to just land apply it directly from the septic tank. But in recent years, probably I'd say close to 10 years ago, at least 5 years ago, when I had it pumped out and I said, you know, you go ahead and dump it in my manure pit if it would save money. And I was told that they could no longer do that. They could no longer spread it, land applied. They could no longer put it in the manure pits, and that they had a contract with some municipal wastewater treatment plant, and it had to be delivered there. So I don't think septic tank pump outs are being land applied anymore.
Okay, thanks, Rodney.
And the other question, or maybe question I have, is you know, Cabot cheese plant there in Cabot, they don't have a big enough waste system, so they are currently hauling stuff out of there, and I believe they are spreading it directly on land, but I don't know much more than that about it. We were asked once if we wanted to have it applied to our land, and we declined to have it, but
Okay. All right, thanks, Rodney. Mike's hand's up again, and I'll let him go, and then John O'Brien will go to you. So Mike?
So commercial commercial septage is banned, but domestic septage still can be land applied. So they probably, Rodney, were looking at your tank. Does your tank take both waste from your house and from your barns?
No, just the house.
Okay, so domestic septage can still be land applied. They may not have had a permit to land apply it, but it still can be land applied.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Mike. John O'Brien?
So Mike might know this. Why does DEC let this happen? I would think any sort of land application of material with PFOSs or PFOAs would be a problem. And have they wanted to have some jurisdiction over this?
Mike?
I would recommend you read the report that I sent up. It has an entire section about chemicals of emerging concern. It also highlights the situation that the state is in regarding how to manage sludge and septage, because there's no easy answer.
Do we know
Okay.
how? I
Go
just
ahead.
wondered how much of this has high levels? Is it, of the septage and the sludge that's being applied? Is it 50%? Is it just a few sort of bad tanks or certain towns maybe with manufacturing, or is it most of it?
John,
I think that would be better posed to A&R than the people that are working on the PFAS issue. I think they have a better snapshot of basically the scope and scale of it in our bodies and in the environment.
Carrie, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to say that those results are still coming in. A&R hired a consultant to do the testing, do the sampling, and develop a report. And that data is still very much unanalyzed, but coming in now.
Okay, Rodney, I see your hand up. Did you have a question or a comment? Okay, your hand is down. All right. And Mike, your hand's still up, but I'm assuming you just didn't lower it. That's okay. Are there any other questions about this situation? John, your hand is up.
Yes, I'm just wondering why we have particular concern about pathogens. Carrie mentioned it a couple of times. And unless you're dealing with something like anthrax, or you're putting it where they're going to be leafy vegetables growing, in many cases, pathogens wouldn't make any difference at all. Runoff perhaps, but most pathogens are not going to survive very long once they're spread in a field where there's sun and other stuff affecting them.
Carrie?
So the Class A or exceptional quality biosolids that get sold to homeowners as fertilizers have to go through the pathogen kill step before it gets set on the shelf at Walmart. The other issue with pathogens, I believe their EPA standards and guidelines around pathogen kill, that this is sort of a federal program that DEC administers. And
well, I mean, it certainly makes sense if you're going to sell it in a store where the routine consumer would buy it and put it on who knows what. But if you're talking about something like turf grass or lots of stuff, it just doesn't seem like it would matter if there are pathogens present. But in any case, I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of curious, Carrie, what are we talking about when we're talking about pathogens? Are these like E. coli?
Yeah, and again, I believe it's outlined in the
In the
document.
report?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so committee, our homework assignment tonight is to read the report. Hopefully it's not too long. Um, I'm wondering if there's a general sense that we would like to, knowing that it might not be possible this year, but is there a general sense that you would like to move forward with something that would attempt to at least manage this situation, which is, I think, what Carrie's asking for, right? Yeah. I see a thumbs up from Sharon. You can also just do a like this.
Where, and would we do that in the housekeeping bill? Is that where we're talking about doing it?
I think Carrie said that it would nicely fit into, I think it's S-254, which we have now sent a letter to A&R, or we're going to send a letter to A&R, saying that we should wait a year. But I don't know, would it fit in the housekeeping bill, Mike O'Grady? Your hand is up.
It's 40 pages long. So, that's not a criticism of the substance. It's just took some changes throughout 2 different chapters of law. So that's why it's long, for consistency throughout those chapters. So I'm not making a judgment about whether it goes in to the housekeeping bill or not. I just wanted to let you know that it would be a significant addition lengthwise to the bill.
Okay, but in terms of a vehicle, if 254 actually gets to us and we've solved.
265, you mean?
I'm sorry, is it 265? Yeah, 254, your adequate shelter. Yeah, sorry. If
Okay.
265 actually gets to us, could we, and we've solved the 1-year waiting period, could we potentially use that as a vehicle to implement this other language?
Yeah, I think it's germane.
Okay, thanks. All right, John Bartholomew's hand is up again. John? You're muted. Okay, you just forgot. Okay, his hand is down now. All right. So, Linda, did you load that report onto our website? If you're pressing the space bar, it's not working.
Sorry, the report that Michael sent the link to?
Yes.
Yes, I hope I have it. I'll give it a try.
Okay, fantastic. So committee, I would ask you to take a look at that tonight, and maybe we'll continue to discuss this tomorrow. We also may have some, I'm just looking at so tomorrow we meet from 11 until 1, so have a snack before we get together, or you can eat while we're online. But yeah, take a look if you can at that report, and maybe we'll have additional discussion about that going forward. So do we have anything else that we want to bring up? I'm going to remind you that when we get done with this live stream, we will stay on the line. I'm going to recommend that you all get up and move around a little bit. I'm sitting in my very comfy, easy chair, but I can tell that if I don't get a little bit of movement, I will be sort of locked in this position for the rest of the day. I feel like the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. So is there anything you'd like to add? Mike, you unmuted yourself.
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay,
And Carolyn, I'm not getting the document on, sorry.
okay, you're
But
not.
I will put it on the webpage so people.
Yeah, no,
can
that's all,
access it.
that's all I want. I just want it on the webpage if you can.
Absolutely, no problem.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, is there anything else that you would like to mention? Carrie, your hand is up.
It is, and I did get a text from Ryan, and he said human waste can't go into a manure pit,
Okay.
and he agreed to. He's on. He's on. I'll let Ryan answer.
Oh, hi, Ryan. Welcome. Can you unmute yourself? You are unmuted. How come we can't hear you? Linda, do you know what's going on with Ryan?
I do not. It might take a minute to connect, but he should be on in a moment.
Okay, super. Thank you. Okay, Ryan seems to be on, but muted.
Hi,
And
this is Ryan. Can you folks hear me?
yes, hi, Ryan. Thanks so much.
Hi, good afternoon.
All right. Do you know what the question is?
Yes, sorry, multiple, I think I got it sorted now. As my understanding of the question is, can septage or human waste be put into a waste storage facility on a farm? The answer is no. That waste cannot be deposited in a waste storage facility.
Okay. Wait a minute. Can you say that again, Ryan?
So the question, as I understand it, is human waste. Can human waste go into a manure pit? And the answer is no, it cannot.
Okay, Mike has to leave us right now, so Mike, you can go ahead. Thank you. All right. Okay, human waste cannot go into a manure pit. So you can't, can human waste be spread on a field?
Well, I believe that would, as you folks have been discussing, questions about septage and other folks, would need a permit from DEC to be able to land apply it. That would not be an agricultural waste generated on a farm that would be subject to the required agricultural practices. So any land application on an agricultural crop field under the current paradigm would have to be permitted by DEC, as I understand.
Okay, so we had a conversation earlier about waste being like if manure, if septic tanks are pumped out, if it's commercial, they cannot be land applied. If they're domestic, they can. But you're saying that it would require a permit to be able to do that.
I would assume it's a regulated activity. The regulation of sewage would fall to DEC. All I can share is that the Water Quality Division and the RAPs, we don't regulate that. It's not a regulated activity. We regulate manure and other agricultural waste, and human waste cannot be mixed with agricultural waste.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
All right, are there any questions? Oh, Terry, I see your hand is up. Do you have a question? We have about 4 minutes left.
I was just wondering if maybe Ryan or Carrie knows whether Middlebury still spreads their sludge on well, it used to be the Devoid Farm south of Middlebury, and now it's owned by Knops. I haven't been by there a lot lately, but I just wondered if they still do that.
Terry, I don't know, but I can certainly find out and get back to you.
They would
Okay.
have to be permitted to do it, right?
All right. Ryan, do you know the answer to that question?
I do not.
All right, thanks. All right, gang, we have 3 minutes left. What you're gonna do for your homework is to go to the website, our ag website, and look for that report that Linda loaded up, and maybe take a look at it tonight if you have a chance, or tomorrow morning. We don't meet until 11 tomorrow. And if we just have one session tomorrow, it's 11 to 1. I would ask anybody who, is in the committee, or anyone who is listening in via YouTube, if you have any questions or folks you want to hear from, to please email me or Linda Lehman at our legislative addresses, and I'm sure you know what they are, and share with us who you would like to hear from on any of the issues we've discussed today. Sharon, your hand is up.
I just wanted to make sure that I was clear that Ryan said that so the earlier conversation about biosolid applications, about being either commercial or domestic, residential, and we'd heard that residential could be applied, land applied without being treated for pathogens. But it sounds like what Ryan was saying is that in fact, treated or untreated, it has to be.
You got muted, Sharon, and I did not do it.
No, it was me being a Luddite. What's the last thing you heard?
Something about land applied.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, Ryan, are you saying that somebody would have to get there'd have to be some certification to apply septage, whether it's domestic or whether it's residential or commercial? And I guess my question was that it sounds like what I heard earlier, not from you, was that if it is a residential source of septage, that it can be land applied without being treated for pathogens. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Sharon, all applications of biosolids or septage need to be permitted through DEC.
Or permitted
So,
that.
yep, all of them need to, any land application of waste needs to be permitted by DEC, unless it's an agricultural waste, and then Brian handles it.
Okay.
Well put, Gary.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Vicky, your hand is up, and I'm going to make this the last question or comment because we need to we need to get off YouTube and do something else.
I was just going to say, speaking of witnesses to hear from, is there anyone out there, Carrie or whoever knows, that just thinks biosolids are the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they would want to testify to us just to hear what they had to say about it?
Carrie, I think that was question was for you.
Yeah, I'll send you a list, Vicky, or I'll send it to Linda and Carolyn of the folks who really do support this practice. Some of them are farmers accepting biosolids currently, but I want to check with them before I say their name live on YouTube.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Carrie. All right, we're going to wrap this up now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, committee members, for being here. And we are going to stop streaming live, but I want you to hold on because we are going to have our tutorial on how to vote remotely. So, Linda, if you can take us out.